Since moving to Japan, most of the questions that I've received from friends and strangers alike have been about working in the country. So today I thought I'd sit down, take all those questions and answer them all in one big Q&A. So without any further faffery, let's just dive straight into it. This is my experience of working in Japan. Officially, my job title is guitar instructor, but as well as guitar, I also teach bass and ukulele. Although guitar teachers are no rare breed by any means, the answer of my job is teaching guitar usually does get a few surprise reactions in most conversations. Well, actually, when I first confirmed that I was going to be moving to Japan, I wasn't really set on doing anything in particular. And actually, when I worked in England, the last job I had, I was working as an electrical design engineer, which is a little bit different to what I'm doing now. But if we go all the way back to 2010, when I graduated from university, I actually graduated from a music university with a diploma in musical performance. So that was actually my training originally. It was only when I realized that making money as a musician was incredibly difficult that I decided to just give it all up and become an engineer. So when I first had that idea of coming to Japan, I was looking at engineering jobs, but the more that I looked, something in the back of my brain was telling me, try to use your music degree, try to put all of that incredible amount of student debt to some kind of good use. So I looked for jobs relating to music instead of engineering, and just by absolute chance, fairly quickly into my search, I found the position that I have now. After a few Skype conversations with the person who runs the school I work at, I was offered the job actually before I came to Japan. So I was very lucky in that regard, and when I got here, within the first week actually, I started my job and I haven't looked back. So far in this job, I haven't worked any overtime, but that's not really due to the fact that I haven't been asked or that I didn't want to. It's just that when I was asked, I already had plans because it was my day off, and well, you just can't change certain plans if they've already been made. So in those particular instances, it wasn't possible for me to do that. I'm not really opposed to the idea of overtime, you know, in the Western sense, when overtime actually is overtime and you get paid for it. So in England, you know, I used to work a fair bit of overtime when required to. And, you know, sometimes it's nice just to get a little bit of extra money if all I'm going to be doing is sitting at home, eating cheese and watching Netflix in my pants. Compared to the average amount of overtime that you might be expecting someone working in Japan to do, I actually look like a bit of a lazy bastard. But hey, whose fault is that? Like most people, I get the weekend off, but except for the weekend being on Saturday and Sunday, my weekend is on Monday and Tuesday. But working in private education, Saturday and Sunday, it's basically you have to work, because if those people have that time off, that's pretty much the peak time for doing lessons. But actually, I prefer having Monday and Tuesday as a weekend because it just means everywhere else is much quieter. And if I do want to go out, then yeah, it's just less to consider having to deal with the crowds. So in terms of holiday or paid annual leave, I don't really have it in the traditional sense where I can choose the days that I want to take off, but it's more that the school will close on the large Japanese national holidays. So for Golden Week, Obon Festival and New Year's, the school will close for between a week, week and a half or 2 weeks, and all the teachers will take off time at the same time. So in total, I do get a good amount of time off work, but I can't really choose when that time is. Also, the bad thing about these 3 holiday seasons is that it's the holiday for everybody in Japan pretty much. So everything is more expensive. Hotels, traveling, you get on a plane or a train, it's almost double, triple the price in some cases. Even a national flight from Tokyo to somewhere else in the country, or a Shinkansen, just everything is super expensive. So you kind of wait a long period of time to take a holiday, and when you do, it just costs you a lot of money. So it's got its ups and downs. So actually I work for an American company, and most of the staff there are foreigners in Japan. So the general atmosphere tends to be pretty laid back, and it's exactly what I'm used to back in England, you know, so stress levels are fairly low. And even when there are kind of concerns or anything that you might be stressed about, compared to what I've seen from Japanese people, we're a bit more free to express our opinions and maybe go against the grain if we don't agree with something that's not perfect, or, you know, maybe if you just don't agree with something that someone in a position above you has said, you're more than entitled to speak your mind and share your opinions, and it just won't come back on you in a negative way. Well, it's kind of yes and no. I wouldn't say that I have to speak Japanese at work, but perhaps 25 to 30% of my students don't really speak any English, or they speak very basic English. So there's a lot of students that I will speak in Japanese too. So for me, this is actually quite good practice, because as a teacher, most Japanese students will generally sit there quite quietly and just listen to what you're saying, which again is completely not what I'm used to in England. Students are often always asking questions, and they're very, sometimes annoyingly, disruptive to the class. You know, they'll try and derail your train of thought. But Japanese students, generally, I will say that they just listen a lot. So I can kind of practice speaking in Japanese, but it's less of a pressurized situation, because I can speak at my own pace and they're not really speaking back to me a lot. You know, we can have a discussion after class, or when I ask them a question during class and they'll answer me, but it's not like a full-blown conversation, or I have to go to some kind of work meeting in Japanese, which I think would be a lot more stressful. Obviously, I'm not going to give you an exact number, but let's just say it's a pretty comfortable salary and it's enough to pay for my bills, my rent, my food, and all the other little luxuries that I enjoy throughout the month. And things like my Netflix, Amazon Prime, my WaniKani subscriptions, going out maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And at the end, I'm left with a little bit left over to save. So all in all, it's pretty good. As far as I'm aware, what I'm earning is a fairly standard salary in Japan. So I think that if you do come here, even on a baseline salary, you can expect to get by. But even just something a little bit above average, you should be able to save some money. Perks. Well, I don't think I'd say there are perks to working in Japan, or in my job in particular. Really, it's just turn up to the job, do the job, and come home. But perhaps other jobs do offer perks. For me, there are none. Well, luckily for me, I'm actually married to a Japanese citizen, so my work permit is kind of granted through my spousal visa. Because of this, I was pretty much able to circumvent any kind of work visa application, or having a company to sponsor me and going through all of the trouble of getting that sorted. So in that regard, I've actually been fairly lucky. This visa's not bulletproof though, so actually after receiving the visa for the first time, it only lasts for 1 year. So this year I will have to renew it, but as far as I'm aware, as long as all my records are in order and I fill out the application without any alarming errors, then it should just be renewed either for another year or possibly for 3 extra years. So it seems to go up in levels 1, 3 or 5 years. I would imagine after about 5 years here, being in the same marriage and having a steady income for all of that time, that renewing visas shouldn't be much of an issue. Actually, when I hear that question, it's not so much something about my job that springs to mind, but just Japanese culture in general. What I'm thinking of is not really being able to show tattoos in public. Now, when I'm not at work and I'm walking down the street, I just generally don't care because they're my tattoos and it's whatever. But at work, I have to play by the rules and keep them covered up. Again, I'm not really someone to complain about somebody else's culture. If people here think that tattoos are offensive or they just don't like the sight of them, then I can understand that. The thing that gets to me is that in the summer when it's 40+ degrees and you're wearing a long sleeve shirt and trousers, it basically feels like someone's wrapped me in cling film and it's just sweat everywhere. So if I could change one little thing, it would be being allowed to wear a t-shirt in the summer. But that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Yeah, definitely. So far, I think it's been great. And actually the job I have at the moment is probably one of the most enjoyable jobs I've had since I started doing jobs, since I became an adult and went to work full time. Being able to kind of pursue a passion that I've had, well, for years now, and it's something that I studied but never really got to utilize fully, is a little bit more satisfying. And also as a teacher, when you get to teach students, watching someone grow because of the information that you've given them is, in a kind of a selfish way, it's quite satisfying, but it's also very comforting to watch someone develop their own skills and achieve their own goals. So if you're thinking about coming to work and live in Japan, then my first bit of advice would just be to make sure that it's definitely the right decision for you. Really write everything down, the pros and the cons, and every reason that you want to come here, and just make sure it's a good decision for yourself. The second would be to really evaluate your own skills and see what kind of jobs you can get. Obviously you need to remember that the language barrier in Japan is quite a big problem. If you speak Japanese, then that's a very big help. A lot of job websites will usually list jobs with a requirement of JLPT level N2 in Japanese, which, as someone who is almost at that level, you'll realise that it doesn't actually really mean anything, because even at that level, daily life is still a struggle. But that's what most employers will look for. So taking the JLPT can really help your chances of getting a job that way. Also, there's very popular websites like Gaijin Pot and Jobs in Japan that offer all kinds of articles, as well as job listings and advice, and a lot of services run through them. So there's always options out there for you. Perhaps one of the most popular ways that people come to Japan is as an English teacher. There are a lot of agencies operating pretty much in every country in the world who are basically just looking for native or near native speaking English people. You don't really even have to have any experience teaching English. The only prerequisite for these jobs, besides being an English speaker, is having a degree, whether it be in music or philosophy or anything. It doesn't have to be related to English in the slightest. But a lot of these agencies will sponsor the person to come to Japan, and then once you're here, you can apply for a different job and get a different visa and start the career that you want to. Okay guys, thanks for watching. So that's just a bit of information about my experience of working in Japan so far. If you found this video useful, then please just give it a quick thumbs up. And if you have any more questions that I didn't answer, then please leave them down in the comments below and I'll try and answer them as soon as I can. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and hit the bell notification for instant updates on any future videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.